We'll be taking a look at something that, was mentioned in passing actually by our guest here on the program yesterday. That's Dr. Emmanuel Bashayi, where he said it's time for us to now take a look at the state and local governments. Now that they're getting more FAC allocations, what are they doing with it? So now it brought us to this question: what actually is the impact of the state and local governments on the Nigerian economy? And that's what we'll be looking at this morning. Joining me virtually to further have this conversation and, of course, talk about other issues is Adegboyega Adebajo. He's an economist and the lead advisor, Amethyst and Ashla Advisory. He's joining us all the way from Lagos. Good morning, Mr. Adebajo.
Good morning, Chiamaka. How are you, and how's the weather in Abuja?
Oh, well, it's hot this morning, but it's fine. But I'm okay. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, before we get into the conversation,
Great.
Top stories there. Let's take a look at some of that story. Now, the credit to private sector dropping to 75.8 trillion naira in August 2025. Is that something that we should be worried about as a country? The fact that private sector is not necessarily taking loans from banks, so much right now.
Ordinarily, you could have thought, okay, it's something not to worry about, but I will say it's fine. And it's a reflection of the government's monetary policy. Bear in mind that the monetary policy rates by the central bank since the start of this year has remained tight. They've kept the MPR rate at 27.5, which is pretty high. And the aim was actually to discourage borrowing. Because the more companies borrow, the more naira that's available to go chase after dollars, as it were. So it's not surprising that credit dropped. But with the last MPR, the 0.5% reduction in MPR may signal a start to some degree of borrowing. But I don't think we will see corporates below a certain level rushing to borrow yet.
Okay. Now, another of the stories that we took was that the Nigeria's money supply is expanding, although, well, government borrowing has declined to 25.74% year on year. Is that something that is good equally for the economy?
Yeah, well, it has both its pros and cons, Chiamaka. The thing about it is this: the government will typically issue treasury bills and federal government savings bonds, and banks and pension funds will invest in this. And that is the usual way and manner in which the federal government will borrow. But if the federal government isn't issuing any of those instruments in the money market, then it means that there's a lot of cash that is not finding its way into these investments and are being held over for a period. Those instruments are typically short term instruments running from 90 days to perhaps 180 days or 270 days at the max. 270 days is 9 months. So with those instruments not being issued, we can be certain that there's a situation where banks are somewhat flush with that amount of cash. Now, when I look at that, I start to understand why the central bank dropped the MPR by 0.5%, because clearly it's about time to start allowing some degree of circulation of money into the system. And the banks themselves may find that they're pretty much awash with cash, and they would want borrowing to trigger up, and so that the credit to the private sector starts to increase again.
Okay, so our last story there that we'll take a look at is the one of the CBN wanting to now take full control of the fixed income market from November 2022. I'm sure, first of all, people out there are wondering what fixed income market is. If you could, best explain that, and why would the CBN want to do this? What does this move actually portend for us?
Well, okay, so I came across the news this morning too, and I've been talking with a few colleagues, professionals about it, and it's not exactly pleasing. Again, there's always a back-end reason why the central bank has taken a decision like this, and I suppose the reasons will emerge later. where they're talking about transparency, where they're talking about settlement. And I'm hoping certain things have not happened, because those are the things that underscore the integrity of a market, like the money markets or the financial markets, as it were. So if the central bank is saying it wants to take on settlement, it wants to ensure transparency, there may have been reports of certain things that may have enabled that. But then my take and that. Okay, so go ahead. Sorry, Chiamaka.
On what you mean by certain things, I feel like you're trying to be. Could you actually expand on those certain things you've been mentioning?
Well, I use certain things because I really don't know what they are at this point in time. Like I said, the news came out today, and it wasn't in the air. It wasn't discussed. So I'm hoping it's not a quick response or quick action to something. I expect over the next few weeks, what has led to that decision will emerge in the discussions one has with officials of the central bank or the capital markets, perhaps. I will prefer that the central bank does not take that position. A lot of us feel that for a regulator, you don't step in and play the role that an operator should be playing. A regulator provides policy environment, enables efficiency of the markets, and ensures that there are sanctions and consequences where there is individual action that leads to a disruption of accountability in the market. So that's the role of a regulator. It's almost like saying the SEC would want to take over a certain aspect of the NGX, the stock exchange, the Nigeria exchange, simply because there's a sense that something is not going on. No, that doesn't happen, and it shouldn't. And I feel that it sort of goes against something that was profound that the governor said when he assumed office. And it was that the central bank was going to be a central bank. And that was so pleasing to my ears, that we were going to leave behind the era where the central bank got itself into something almost like retail banking and was almost an operator in the money market itself. So you have the Financial Market Dealers Association, and they have been running this. There's a platform for that. There are ways in which the central bank can provide the liquidity and the platform and allow the operators in the private sector to run the market and exchange in the market, just like it should be. And I feel that's the way the world goes, wherever it has happened.
Okay. All right, we're really taking quite time on this, but I'm glad that you actually took your time to really break it down and help us understand what that could mean and the implications. Hopefully, as you've said, certain things have not happened, and this is not a reaction to that. Now, to our conversation for today, we're talking about the role of states and local governments in the Nigerian economy. So I'm going to give a brief overview. Now, for economy, revenue generation, and fiscal federalism, that's one of the roles. States and local governments depend heavily on federal allocations from the FARC, that is the Federal Allocations Committee, mostly oil revenue. Now, some states generate internally generated revenue through taxes, levies, and fees. Lagos leads, while many others are lagging. Like, of course, Lagos has that IGR on lock. Now, fiscal imbalance often leaves local governments financially weak. Hopefully, with this autonomy that has been given to them, we expect to see better, coming up. Now, infrastructure development was. States build and maintain intrastate roads, schools and hospitals. Local governments handle rural roads, markets, community health centers, supporting grassroots economic activity, agriculture and food security. States own vast arable land, promote cash crops, irrigation and mechanization. Local governments support farmers at community level, extension services, local markets. Together, they play a big role in Nigeria's push for food self-sufficiency. Now, employment and human capital. States are major employers. civil servants, teachers, health workers. Local governments employ grassroots workers, provide basic services, and stimulate microeconomies. Now, both support education and healthcare, shaping workforce productivity, investment climate, and business support. States set policies on land use, taxation, and ease of doing business. Local governments provide permits, regulate markets, support SMEs at local levels, security and stability. States fund security outfits and logistics for police. Local governments often provide local vigilance and peacekeeping support. Stable local environments boost commerce and investment. Now, these are 6 key areas where the states and the local governments can and impact the Nigerian economy. As you can see from what we've listed out, that these are actually the main bars of the economy really at the state level. Now, do you think here in Nigeria so far, my guest on the program yesterday, Dr. Bashayi, was saying that it's time we start honing the light towards the states and the local government, especially now that their allocations have actually increased from the numbers that I have increased from 2023 to from 3 point something trillion naira to 5 point something trillion naira that states got in 2024, about 2 point something trillion naira or so added to that money that states now are getting from the Federal Allocation Committee. What do you think so far about the state and local government? Are they really doing their due in impacting the Nigerian economy positively?
Chiamaka, it's a big no. The states aren't doing that. The local governments aren't doing it. Lagos State, which you mentioned, is perhaps pretty lucky. I should say it's the local governments that are pretty lucky that the state government is doing so much. But I start to see a situation where the local governments themselves must now be charged to take up certain responsibilities. And you're absolutely right. I was listening to you read out those 6 critical areas, and those are the areas where the man on the street, so to say, will be impacted the most by governance and by politics. We've been talking about reforms of the Nigerian economy. The federal government does this. The federal government says it's stable and all. And the question has always been, yeah, but the man on the streets is not feeling it. There's a macro economy, and the federal government deals with that. But by the time you start wanting to impact the individual Nigerian, it needs to come from the grassroots, because that's the closest that the government can be to the individual citizen. And straight, like I said, a big no. Local governments are not impacting the people yet. There are a few facade type projects going on here and there. There are some projects in some states that are pretty much the kind of projects that people need, but there is no sincerity behind it. And I'm trying to remember what state now built a fantastic hospital and hired equipment to be put in the hospital. And after the launching and commissioning, the equipment was taken away. Maybe perhaps it wasn't paid for. It was part paid, but not fully paid. And of course, the key officials in the state are not using the hospital. So you then start to wonder what exactly is going on. Let's think about some states in more developed areas. And we keep talking about copying the American system as much as we can. And I'm one of those who feel you don't just copy and paste. You copy and you tweak, you adjust before you paste. But we look at the United States, we look at the way some states are run. The governors who govern those states run the states like businesses. And when I say like businesses, not because they're profit oriented, but they're populace oriented. They want to make sure that they are able to deal with the mandates they have in terms of the social contract to the citizens of the state. And that is essential. Now, when you do that, you also need to know that it's going to cost you money to maintain certain services in the states. And once you know your population, you have a very good idea of how much money you need to spend. Then you look at the state and you decide, how can I raise money? People do say that in Lagos, within a short time, we're probably going to have to pay for the air we breathe. There's hardly anywhere in Lagos you can park your car without having to pay for it. You can hardly have a signboard without having to pay for it. Your cars, they don't need VIO officials on the roads or policemen on the road. There are cameras who pick up your car license plate numbers and can automatically check whether you're up to date with your vehicle licenses, with your VIO, or with your vehicle insurance. Because once it starts getting to when my vehicle license expires, I get a text message from the vehicle registration authorities in Lagos State telling me that's about to happen. That's the kind of efficiency. And my take is, if Lagos State is starting to think and to move in this direction, then there's nothing stopping a lot of other states from thinking that way. And I, even though I'm using Lagos State as an example, remember what I said, that yes, even within Lagos State, the local governments need to step up, because at that level, there is a lot more that needs to be done, especially the internal roads in the local governments. There's all that money going to them, and the roads are totally ignored.
Okay.
Perhaps I should just stop there for now.
Okay, yeah. Okay, let's look at something, because you've mentioned Lagos State and the IGR situation. They're doing so well. When we come to the FAC committee meeting where that money is being shared, of course, we have the states that do well. We have the three major states, Lagos and Rivers. I think one of the other South states, maybe Delta, and I think Kano, do well enough. Lagos brings so much because of the IGR, Rivers because of the oil producing states, same for Akwa Ibom. And then, when these monies are shared, some of these states get much more because of what they bring to the table as well. Now, how can other states, now this is my question, how can other states improve their IGR, like Lagos has seemingly found a way to do, despite having resources? And I'm going to go through a bit of the resources. So in case we're wondering which resources do these states have, we go over to Benue. There's limestone, there's coal, there's clay, there's gypsum, there's lead, there's zinc, there's barite. In Kogi, there's iron ore, there's coal, limestone, dolomite, phosphate. There are all these things. We come over to the northeast, there's Borno with oil and gas, although, it's potential. There's Taraba with marble, barite, graphite, lead, zinc. There's Yobe with limestone and clay. There's Bauchi. Over even in Zamfara State, where there is gold, we keep having this. How can these states, begin to improve their IGR so that, in a way, even if the FAC is not coming in so much, they're still able to run and help the country?
So Chiamaka, we need to be very careful here, because when we mention all those minerals, the mineral rights rest with the federal government.
Okay.
Once it's mining, it does not belong to the states. Otherwise, Akwa Ibom, Bayelsa, River State, wherever you've got oil, they're going to claim the same rights, even though it's not solid minerals, it's hydrocarbon. But at the same time, it's mining, it's exploitation of the resources in the ground, and they would say it belongs to the states. However, there is an onus on the states to strive to develop their people and their persons. When you start to do that in such a way that there is greater commercial activity, then you would have people to tax. I can tell you that in a lot of states, people aren't going to want to pay tax because they're barely living hand to mouth. Happily, the tax reform has taken care of very, very low income earners and say they ought not to be taxed. But there's still all sorts of multiple taxes at state level. and they've got to give people the chance to grow, engage in commercial activity and grow. But let me say this. Why is it that we still have a lot of people coming into Lagos and the population of Lagos keeps growing? It's putting pressure on land and people just don't seem to stop coming in. It's because of the prospects of a commercial opportunity, commercial gain, a market access. But a lot of people forget the fact that you can actually become a millionaire if you live and work in Benue states, in Jigawa states. Why? Simply because there are market opportunities in each and every state. And let's understand some fundamentals. What really is the principle behind the business? It is that you identify a problem that needs a solution, you provide that solution at some value, and the people who benefit from that solution pay you back in terms of the value you have put into that solution. And that's the price they pay for it. Now, that principle remains the same throughout. Whether it's that I need a haircut and I pay the man who cuts my hair, whether it's that I need to eat seafood, fish, and I pay the person who sells me seafood, whether it's that I have the opportunity to export shea butter and I pay the person who provides me with processed shea butter, it's all about the same principle. And there is no state in Nigeria. You went through a list of minerals, but above ground in the farms, the opportunities are massive. We're losing all that in the Northwest and the Northeast to insecurity right now, which is a shame. But this is why there needs to be concerted efforts at local government level and at state government level, cooperating with the military and the federal government to ensure that insecurity is stopped once and for all, so that the benefits of what opportunities that exist in those states can be taken advantage of as soon as possible. I would happily move out of Lagos, Chiamaka, and I'm not I'm not saying this just because it seems like a thing to say. I'll happily move out of Lagos and live somewhere perhaps much more quiet than what the hustle and bustle gives. You know, you think, okay, I'll retire out of here. And a lot of people who have retired do not want to stay in Lagos anymore because the drive is not the commercial objective or target. The drive at that time changes to some peace, quiet, and environment, and perhaps a small type of business. So every state should look in terms of what is it that we can offer people. We say in Nigeria, we should have that kind of free movement. I've traveled around the country. I've met people who live in certain states, who've lived there for years, and they're not from those states. And they're very happy where they are doing what they're doing. So states need to really look and think in terms of what should we be doing, one, to enhance the capacity of our populace in terms of being able to undertake opportunities to improve themselves, improve their earning. What can we do in terms of creating an enabling environment to allow such small businesses or even established corporate businesses thrive? You know, what can we do as a state or as a local government to ensure that when these businesses start to thrive, yes, they pay their tax, but at the same time, we are mindful of what their challenges are as they grow. Every state needs to start to rethink itself and how it plans. Let me just stop there, Chiamaka, for now.
All right. So now you mentioned something when you were trying to talk about the whole mining thing and how it belongs and is all under the federal government. So my question is, how sustainable is this current fiscal federalism for Nigerian states and local governments?
Oh, well, there you go. Now that's one that's almost political and more political than economic. I think there is enough when you look at the exclusive list and the concurrent list. There's enough over there for state governments to start to fight to take what is on the concurrent list, and it belongs to them. Let me say this. The President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, was the governor who, as AD, fought the then president. And when I say fought, I put that in quotation marks. The then president, President Olusegun Obasanjo then, in terms of what he felt was concurrent and Lagos State should have its own and run its own. An example is the fire service. It's made it plain. What business does the federal government have running a fire service in states? You know, so for governors, what they should understand is that they have a president who understands the importance of fiscal federalism. And this is the time they need to strive towards that. There's a reason why the airport in Minna is active again. And even though you've got just one flight coming in there, it's because the governor of Niger State felt that this airport had been abandoned. I can get more people coming in and out of my state if it's active, perhaps if there are flights, because people do not want to travel by road because of insecurity. Mm-hmm. And he sought, you know, approval and permission to have certain waivers, certain rights, certain degree of control, and he got it. And so the airport is more or less, you know, there's FAN there, but there's also the Niger State government in greater percentage with the airport. And it's been serviced by at least one airline. So you can actually fly to Minna these days. So that's the kind of thing we're talking about. And of course, when he was going to do that, the president encouraged what he was doing. Governors should look at the concurrent list again and sit down and use it as a basis through which they will develop a strategy and work out something for 4 years. One of the things that makes it difficult for states to really thrive is that each time there is an election that leads to a change in governor, the new governor comes in, junks everything the old governor has done, and tries to start up his own project. Note, I said tries to start up his own projects. If there's anything that has worked well for Lagos State, it has been the continuity in terms of the existence of a master plan and the execution of that same plan by successive governors. Okay. And I think the same should start being done in other states.
Okay. Now, yesterday too, I'm going to reference back to my guest yesterday on the program. He talked about during the Great Recession over in America, that the government felt that the best way to help the economy instead of giving people money was to build infrastructures. And in so doing, the economy kind of, you know, boosted. So I'm going to the conversation of infrastructure. How can states, because that's one of the important things, like today, I believe the president is going to be over in Abia State for the commissioning of the Port Harcourt Road done by the Abia State government. But now, how can states right now, you know, finance large-scale infrastructure without over-reliance on debt? How can that work? How can private partnership come into play to see that states function well as well?
Well, you know, the first thing is you've got to create an enabling environment to be able to attract foreign investment. I should say this. The Dangote refinery is situated in a free trade zone. And by technical definition, a free trade zone is not, even though it's in Lagos State, but what happens there is not, so to say, Nigerian. When goods leave the free trade zone and come into Lagos State or into Nigeria, they are being imported, technically speaking. It's a Chinese wall, but it makes sense, absolute sense, to a foreign investor who would want to come in, set up a factory in a free trade zone or an export processing zone, and know that he has certain protection in terms of an investment. Now, when you start to see the kind of disputes that happen, foreign investors are worried as to what can happen to my investment if I'm situated in this country and people start to disrespect the terms under which I have brought in money. The first thing any state government needs to do is to be able to think in terms of how do I make sacrosanct what these foreign investors want to do in my state? What degree of support do I need to bring them in? What are the terms? And I wouldn't say that people negotiate the wrong terms, but as a state, the terms which you should negotiate with a foreign investor should be fair. It shouldn't unduly be in favor of the foreign investor. Yeah, you can work for 10, 15 years to take your money out. But in those 10, 15 years, you want to be able to build up capacity locally. And we want to know that even when you've made your money and you exit, this endeavor can still continue in this state for as long as those resources are available. That's the way to set it up. And that's the kind of thinking that should happen. Sadly, this doesn't always happen. And that's why you have attempts to start projects and those attempts fail, because foreign investors are very careful. The minute they see that you cannot honor agreements, you cannot respect fairness or the principles of business, they start to back off, because nobody wants to bring in, a truckload of money and lose it all just because of an individual's, inclination.
Okay.
That has stopped, certain types of investments coming in, because you ask, how can they get funding to do this? There is so much funding available. Let me remind you, Chiamaka, of the story of a man who was asked to go and sell shoes, and he got to a country and he sent a telegram back home and he said, oh, don't send over any shoes. People don't wear shoes in this country, so we cannot sell any shoes. It's not their culture to wear shoes. But then another company sent a salesman to that same country. He got there, noticed that people don't wear shoes. He sent a telegram home and said, please send lots of shoes. People don't wear shoes here. There is an opportunity to sell lots of shoes in here. So the perception of the investors when they come in is very important. And when I talk of state governments providing enabling environments, it's about then making the states welcome to foreign investments. When they do so, the large projects they need to do, whether it's electricity, and that's a significant opportunity that's going to waste. I can think in terms of some states, when you look at the population, if every home is paying just about 10,000 naira a month for electricity, you multiply that. And because it's an electricity project, you run that over 25 years, increasing that 10,000 gradually. You'll see that that's going to turn up into a lot of money. And the minute electricity is reliable and it becomes available, you'll be amazed at the spin-off small-scale businesses that can start with that. That alone is a start. The next thing are the roads, accessibility. Almost every month, I read of at least 3 boat accidents that happen either in Niger State, in Sokoto State, in Kwara State, or somewhere else. It's 2025. There's enough in terms of safety that is known for water transport that we do not need to have boat accidents anymore. There's some states where going in between certain villages will be ideal if you can develop the road transportation and make it safe and secure. Water transportation. So this is a second thing that goes with electricity. And the third is to make sure that where people come together physically to trade, let them feel safe and encourage financial institutions to come in and provide the necessary platforms to effect payment systems in such a way that people feel they will get value for what they're providing.
Okay. we'll have to cut you short and end our conversation here. But just before you go, in less than 20 seconds, do you think that the current sharing formula from the FAC is, should be changed, or that's good enough for states and local governments?
For now, it's good enough for states and local governments. It's a new formula. Let's see how it works out. It's not permanent. It's not cast in stone. And if there is a need to change, I'm sure there'll be developments, there'll be discussions, and we will see what happens. Let's see them use what they're getting right now. That's important. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Adebajo, for your insights this morning, talking to us about, how states and local governments can do well to better impact the Nigerian economy.
You're welcome.
And that's the much we have for you this morning on the program. For more of our news, programs and documentaries, do follow us on our social media platforms and on our YouTube live stream. I've been your host this morning, Chiamaka Nwafor. Same time, same place next week. Bye for now.